I love resource management games, always have. I really enjoy building up a town, gathering and managing resources, working to the next goal, unlocking the next building, and so on. Some of my earliest memories of this genre were from the Settlers series, specifically the Settlers 2, a game which depended a lot on path placement to move your goods across your village, which probably ignited my love of roads and gaming. But after the Settlers 2, that style of game mostly went away. Not resource management games, of course. No, those are flourishing with games like Factorio, but the small-scale, build a town connected by roads and flags type of game. So when I decided to try a fun-looking resource management game featuring happy little robots, I was more than pleasantly surprised to find out that after all these years, someone out there had remembered too. Not to say this game is just the Settlers with robots. It does wear its inspiration on its sleeve, but it also mixes up the formula more than enough to stand on its own. If you're not familiar with the Settlers, don't worry. I'll do a comparison at the end, but I'll also explain it from scratch. The story, what little there is that these self-aware, self-replicating little fellas decided that indentured servitude to humans wasn't for them. So now they're on the run from the cops, trying to find a new home. Because of this, they only know how to build for humans. This is the reason why, despite being one of the most advanced technologies in the galaxy, you won't be making anything high-tech, instead just chopping logs and mining coal. I feel this is a bit of a missed opportunity on the theme. It feels as though you could have swapped out the robots with humans and the game would basically be the same. This game is definitely going for a vibe, and that vibe is chill. The graphics are fairly simple but colourful. Having the scenery use very few but bright colours works well in creating the landscape. It's really nice to look at, and there is a small degree of terraforming you can do. But in practice, all the terraforming means is that your colony will cut into the landscape, ruining it for everyone. One of the best tools the Colonist has to maintain its atmosphere is the music. Just listen to this and tell me you don't feel more relaxed. There is combat in the game, but even when cannon fire is raining down, the soundtrack is relentlessly calm. But it's the robots which are the real stars of the show. The simple graphics work in the game's favour here, and these guys are really quite charming and well animated. Each job has its own robot, so when building something for the first time, it can be fun to see what kind of robot will turn up. Though for my money, Captain Bot wins here. To be honest, more of the robots just need hats. The buildings look pretty good too, but the animations on these don't quite match up with the detail. For example, this smelter has a mould on the floor that the iron bars would go into, but the asset is never used. Instead, Smeltbot just hammers a little and the iron bars come out. Similarly, buildings only have a building and built model, which is a shame because I love it when these games show you the buildings actually being built. It might be a bit much to ask for a Civ 6 style building animation, but I would have liked to have seen one or two more phases to some of the buildings. So, what is the Colonists as a game? Well, as I said, it's a resource management game with robots. You'll start with just a landed spaceship and begin to cut down trees to make logs. From there, you'll be able to start building out your colony. Everything will need to be connected by roads. These will be the veins of your colony. Everything needs to pass through them, and blockages can be very problematic. Placing the roads down can be a puzzle of efficiency in and of itself, and I love it. And if, like me, you love roads, well, this game has two types of them. Double the fun. Now we have some robots set up to gather resources for us, we need to feed, power them. This brings us to the most important resource of the game, and what you'll spend a large chunk of your time managing, energy. Energy is the blood of your colony. You'll need to build houses for this. The robots don't need shelter, but it is where they create energy using food and water. I'm not entirely sure why, but just roll with it. Luckily, not all robots need energy, so the fisheries, for example, don't need energy to produce fish to produce energy. You'll figure out which robots do and don't need energy fairly quickly, so don't worry if you get confused at first. Now we're really starting to look like a colony. And like a true colony, we need to expand. Your building and gathering area will be limited by your borders. To expand them, you'll need to build watchtowers. Just be careful, as removing and repositioning them can be a real pain, so make sure you plan ahead lest you end up like me, needing to build a tower to cover one square. Could I have just ignored that square rather than build a tower? No. No, I could not. The next thing you'll want to get started with is research. I love a good research mechanic in my games, and I'd say this is a good one. Research itself is quite simple. Get a ton of your highest tier goods to a workshop, and your research bots will hit them with a hammer until they learn what a boat is. Almost all researchers will change up gameplay. Sure, there are some that just give percentage upgrades, but the majority of them will unlock at least a building or resource. This means research feels important from the first upgrade to the last, and part of the puzzle is which order to get some of these things. Research is divided up into 3 tiers, and each one unlocks a bunch of buildings at once. Going up the tiers can briefly slow down research, as it will often need a lot of resources you've just unlocked. But I found the more levels of this I play, the more prepared I am for this to happen. I leave more space by certain lower tier resources I'll need to process later. I'll leave a lot of space by my workshop for storage yards as I go. So, more research means more energy, which means the colony must grow. Each tier brings with it new energy requirements, which means you'll need to make new energy chains, only this time they'll be significantly bigger. The first time you go up a tech level, it can be difficult to try and fit everything into the space provided. Even worse at level 3. These buildings are massive. It's something that, once again, you'll get better at each time, but it can leave a lot of these levels feeling cramped as you try 5 or 6 times to find a space for an orchard that can fit 10 trees. Along with new buildings also comes bigger and more complicated logistical networks. Looking at this all at once could be overwhelming, but luckily the game delivers mechanics and challenges at a decent pace, so it feels more like you're learning how to solve one puzzle, and then when you understand that, you need to solve it again alongside another puzzle. I'll dive into the logistical mechanics a little bit later, but for those who don't consider Microsoft Excel a hobby, let's continue. If you play the campaign, after you've beaten level 2, you'll actually get to choose which type of level you want to play next. The Colonists really has 2 campaigns, each with 6 levels. One is purely peaceful and economy based, where the only real enemy is time. And another combat focused campaign, where the only real enemy is the robots trying to kill you. If you go the economy route, you'll get to play with boats. If you have access to water, you can build a shipwright and a harbour. Build a boat with the shipwright and have it explore the seas. Eventually, you'll find an island you can inhabit, pop down a new harbour with built-in robot printer, and can start colonising that too. As the game goes on, many islands will have resources unique to themselves, so you'll need to transport goods all over the map. Boats can go between 2 or more harbours, carrying as many goods as they can, and you can get a real fleet going on. You can even get bigger boats, bigger harbours, and eventually, land boats. On the other side of the campaign, combat functions quite simply, but has a big effect on the game. The way it works is that if you get your towers to level 2, they can shoot arrows, which you must produce. Then, you and your enemy fling your economy at each other until one of you stumbles, or researches cannons. If you place your watchtowers carefully, you can have 2 of your watchtowers in range of 1 enemy watchtower, and do more damage to them than they can repair. But if you get stuck in a 1 versus 1 tower off, well then I hope you brought your trench shovel, as this is going to take a while. While this is simple enough, it will also completely change the tone of the game. Gone is the relaxing feel of placing a happy little woodcutter and expanding gradually across the map. In its place is a mad rush to expand your borders up to the enemy and research arrows faster than they can. I really like how the Colonists has laid out its campaigns though. The combat route won't be for everyone, so it's nice to be able to avoid it if you want to. It feels like it would be tailor-made for multiplayer, but as of right now, outside of a few mumbles, there are no real plans to add a multiplayer mode. And while that might be a shame, this is a single player game first and foremost, and I'd rather have more dev time put into the logistics. Speaking of, it's that time. It's time to talk about logistics. One of the things that kept me up really late more than once playing this game is how much you can refine your colony. If left to their own devices, your robots will actually be quite inefficient. You see, when a building needs a resource, it sends out a request for the nearest available resource, which could be 2 islands away. Take for example a smelter near an iron mine. It has plenty of iron, but it will need to request coal to function. It can hold 4 coal while it's producing, so it asks for 4 from a faraway coal mine. Now, if it was smart, it would request the next 4 coal while these ones are on the way. But it won't do that. This means the smelter will be very inefficient as it spends most of its time waiting for coal. This is where storage yards come in. Don't think about storage yards as places for excess goods, but rather as goods buffers. To this end, you'll actually have to whitelist which goods can be stored here, as there are none by default. And even then, it can't hold hundreds of items like a storehouse in the Settlers. So, if we build a storage yard next to our smelter, which is only allowed coal, this will mean, at first, tons of coal will be moved over to fill up the yard. Then, when the smelter needs coal, this will be the closest source and hence used first. The storage yard will then ask for coal from across the map, but still has a large stockpile for the smelter to use in the meantime, and can request more than 4 coal at once. How about energy? We're going to need a lot of it, right? Well, transporting food and water can really gum up your road network. So the best solution is to never have these resources enter the road network at all. You see, if you link up a number of buildings using paths, the second type of road, they can trade resources from their own storage to another without a flag. So what you can do is create pods of production, essentially self-contained mini production centres for certain goods. Mainly energy, but you could do it with any group of buildings that process the same material. But what if you have extra water and another pod needs it? Well, that's why we have blacklists. For flags, you can stop resources from passing through them. This can keep all the goods an energy pod needs in its own mini network, keeping the rest of the roads clean. You can also use blacklists with harbours. Let's say we have Coal Island here with a shaft mine that will never run out, but we also have an above ground coal mine back at home. If we want to build a storage yard next to our shaft mine so that we can have coal ready to export, then we run the risk of our small time coal miner clogging things up. Well, with import rules, we can tell this harbour to never import coal. This will mean that the coal from the small mine will never have to go through our harbour and fill up our storage, but the coal can still be exported to areas that need it. I could go on and on about things like having multiple road networks or fine-tuning storage placement, but I think you get the idea. I have over 20 hours in the Colonists, and each time I start a new level, I'm digging into mechanics that I've previously been neglecting and wondering, how can I get a little bit more out of my robots? Productivity is king after all. I still haven't taken the time to dive into priority distribution, for example, but I'm sure there's still an extra few percentage points to find. And that's pretty much all there is to it. But the big question, and it may be an unfair one, how does it compare to the classic, the masterpiece, The Settlers 2? Well, while I don't think it's going to be knocking it off its pedestal, I think it actually holds its own. They could have gone the easy route here and just carbon copied The Settlers, but they didn't do that. There's enough here to make it a unique experience, keeping fans of The Settlers happy, while also being different enough to engage those same fans. The energy mechanic, for example, is a big divergence from The Settlers, and while it can take up an excessive amount of real estate at high levels, it does keep things interesting as you balance raw resource expansion with energy infrastructure. While the road network may be the most obvious comparison, based on how differently storage works, with a much heavier focus on logistics and throughput, this too feels familiar, but different. If you were a fan of The Settlers 2, then I'm confident you'll be a fan of the Colonists. And if you're a fan of the Colonists, then why not look up The Settlers 2 10th Anniversary Edition? I think you'll be a fan of that too. So, do I recommend the Colonists? While I think the game has its flaws, some of which are by its nature of being an indie game with a small team, I think the biggest missed opportunity here was the theme. But even this is a roundabout compliment. I just really loved the little robots and felt that they could have been utilised more. I don't know if the team has any future plans for games beyond this, but I think they could be onto something with these little guys as their mascots. But theme aside, this is an addictive rabbit hole of a logistical puzzle game. I'm actually surprised at how little press this game has, as it was just what I was looking for, and the more I play it, the more fun I have. After 20 hours and more to go, I don't think you'd be disappointed with your purchase if you're a fan of the genre. Plus, it easily earns the Name Not Found Has Good Roads award. If management games aren't your thing, then it becomes a bit of a harder sell. While it's fine at first, you're eventually going to have to get down and dirty with graphs if you want to get those shiny, shiny gold medals. And I do want them. I want them all. And that silver medal. That silver medal's just staring at me. Taunting me. Yes, The Colonists is available now on Steam and Nintendo Switch for £20 or $25. Until next time.